And as we soon begin day 3 of the Senate trial, we are joined in Washington by Seth Berenzweig. He's a constitutional attorney. Okay, Seth, first to privilege. Are the president's men correct when they talk about it being protected by the Constitution?
Well, in terms of certain testimony of witnesses and documents, there could be specific and limited elements of executive privilege, but it wouldn't likely be a complete and total ban. And it would also depend upon what it specifically relates to. So, for example, if John Bolton somehow ends up getting approved for a deposition to prepare potentially for the admission of his testimony, there would have to be a page-by-page determination. But ultimately, the problem with the administration's arguments has been that it's been extremely broad as a complete hold back to any of the information that Adam Schiff and his colleagues are asking, which is one of the main pivotal elements of his argument that he provided to the Senate chamber yesterday.
I want to talk to you, too, Seth, about this being there are no criminal charges in this. And I think that's the point that has got to be made if you're looking on the Democrat side. You've got to find high crimes or misdemeanors in this. And then you hear these arguments. We have heard these arguments before. Now we're just hearing them in a lengthy fashion all at once. Do you think this is hurting their case? Do you think it's helping? Do you think it's going nowhere?
Well, I think that the Democrats' arguments, especially as laid out by Mr. Schiff yesterday and will be tied more to the law today, do point to specific statutory crimes. Certainly, one of the arguments by the president's lawyers, including Alan Dershowitz, is that there are no specific crimes and that there cannot be impeachment based upon the abuse of the office and obstruction of Congress. However, Professor Dershowitz accurately stated on the air a number of years ago that abuse of power is an offense that is specifically subject to the high crimes and misdemeanor clause. With respect to obstruction of Congress, there is a very specific statute that makes that a felony. Just ask Roger Stone. He was convicted of it just a couple of weeks ago. So, at the end of the day, I think that these constitutional and legal issues are critical, not only as to how they affect President Trump. For example, we're going to have a very critical decision coming up shortly as to witnesses, but they'll also continue to relate to the constitutional balance of power in the future in terms of the relationship between the executive and the legislative branch, because some of the arguments go, if these allegations are going to get a full pass by the Senate, it's going to impact future presidencies and the interpretation of the Constitution, regardless of what political side of the aisle that you may happen to be on. So regardless of through what political lens you're watching these events that are taking place, there's going to be significant constitutional and operational implications that are going to be coming over the coming days.
Very interesting. The president's legal defense team obviously keeping a close eye. The president as well paying attention, tweeting out his remarks. What are you most looking forward to when we're seeing the president's defense team speak out and have their set time on the Senate floor?
Sure. I think that I would really like to hear how they attack the facts. A lot of their posturing has been really based upon some procedural jockeying, talking about why should the Senate do the House's job if they couldn't get the witnesses, why do we need to do their job? I don't think that that kind of procedural argument is going to resonate on the substance. I'm looking forward to seeing what do the president's lawyers have to say about the facts. What can they lay out to demonstrate that he had the factual and the legal basis to be able to do what he did? So when they say that he did nothing wrong, you have to go beyond it was a perfect call. Get out of the conclusionary statements and go into the facts. Let's see what the president's attorneys can do. That's going to be critical as the country is going to be watching this over the coming weeks.
When we're watching this here play out today, obviously this is going to be a different argument here. We're going to hear from the president's team today, and you kind of like touched on it where, look, a lot of people said that Adam Schiff did a nice job in laying out the facts. Is that something, like you said, we're going to need to see today from the president's team? The other thing I wanted to ask you, too, is do you think this is the last chance here to convince the Senate, look, hey, he needs to be impeached, or is this for the American people, I wonder? What's your take on that?
Well, that's a great question. I think the answer is both. This is really playing out in two courts. It's playing out in the court of the Senate chamber as being presided by the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, and that's certainly a proceeding that is riveting all of us every day. But this is also going to be playing out into the court of public opinion in light of the elections that are happening in November. So, for example, if you take a look at the arguments over the last day or so with regard to trying to set forth the procedural amendments to the rules to allow immediately a ruling on witnesses and documents instead of just throwing it off until later, that is also to show and to argue to the American people that there is, as Nancy Pelosi asserts, a cover-up. Now, of course, that goes through the political lens that inevitably we're all going to be looking through, but there's going to be a number of different trials of public opinion that will be happening here. That's why it's so important for the president's lawyers over the coming days to really engage in the facts. Can they do that? Can Jay Sekulow go in, roll up his sleeves, and really get into the facts and explain specifically why the president had the basis of authority to do what he did? They may be up to the task. Those answers are heading for us right around the corner. We'll
see. And just one final question, Seth, for you. Like you said, we're going to be watching those lawyers' arguments, but we also want to keep an eye on the moderate Republican senators. Do you think any of them could be potentially swayed by what we've seen so far presented by Adam Schiff?
I think it's possible with regard to the witnesses and documents. It's still going to, of course, be a real uphill battle on the ultimate vote for removal. But I would say yes. Lamar Alexander is a senator that doesn't get talked about a lot in that regard. In addition to Murkowski, Mitt Romney, there are going to be a few Republicans that are going to be in the middle. Remember, they have enough votes to be able to come in and make profound differences as to rulings on whether documents and witnesses are going to be allowed to come in. That's still very much on the table. That's going to be a hotly debated topic, and that's going to be a huge pivot point that we're going to learn more about over the coming days.
All right, we'll keep an eye on it. Seth Berenzweig, he's a constitutional attorney. Thanks for joining us from Washington.